When you sit down bleary-eyed with a box of cereal, you may think that you're just grabbing a quick, nutritious breakfast. But you're also contributing to the biggest success story of the modern food industry. Inside the cereal box is one of the most sophisticated confections of invention, processing and advertising that modern business has ever seen.
Until the breakfast cereals arrived, there was no such thing as convenience foods.
They've transformed what we eat and the way we live. 700 products compete for our attention in a saturated sector. But what all cereals have in common is that they started as grain, a cheap and characterless commodity. The grain is processed before advertising loads it with meaning. The result is sold for a big profit. Understand this process, and you understand the modern food business.
From the industry point of view, cereals are just wonderful because what they are is really, at heart, carbohydrates, pretty cheap to buy. It's just like a blank canvas for an artist to create products using very cheap materials to create enormously lucrative products.
It was like a gold rush. At that time, you could buy a bushel of grain for 75 cents and make $12 worth of cereal from it.
I think in the year 1911 there was something like 108 different brands of cornflakes all being produced in this one tiny corner of America.
Remember what we say, you make it.
The route to success was clear. Heavy spending on advertising means powerful imagery, brand loyalty, and boxes flying off the shelf.
Okay.
It remains so today. More money is spent on advertising cereal than on any other food. So why do people choose branded cereals?
Good question. I think they trust, first of all, advertising. They trust what you tell them, and what you tell them is true.
Nice save, Pat.
Thanks, Tony. Like to try your luck?
Why, sure, Pat. But first, let's break...
The supreme advantage branded cereals have over own brand is that we all grew up with them. They're among the first foods we engage with emotionally as children.
What a goal.
Breakfast cereals have been targeted so relentlessly from their very first days, particularly at children, and they're very much part of the food that people are weaned on.
S is for sun, and B is for bringing up a bouncing baby in the sunshine on a taste he likes.
I grew up eating Frosties and Cocoa Pops and Fruit Loops. I still eat Frosties and Cocoa Pops and Fruit Loops today. And if my life gets more hectic, it's nice to have some of these things that you can hold on to that tie you back to your childhood and tie you back to when you were younger.
During the 60s and 70s, there was a kind of conflict between the traditional English breakfast, represented by bacon and eggs, and breakfast cereal.
Cereal's the template for elevating convenience as the be-all and end-all of what, what food is.
It wasn't enough to push a product on taste. They needed to project a lifestyle. Cereals declared war on the cooked breakfast.
I think the battle between the egg and the cereal is a battle between two ways of life. The egg stands for wholesome family and country life. The cereal stands for city life, employment, new ways of thinking, speed, modernity in general.
The food industry offered an alternative to cooking because that's where the big profits lay. It had discovered that transforming cheap commodities like grain into premium products like breakfast cereals was the ultimate recipe for success.
We take the kernel, we take out the germ, because the germ contains the most oil, and that would go rancid in cornflakes if we didn't take it out. We also take off the skin because that helps the flavours, the sugar, the salt and the malt to penetrate. We then cook it, dry it down, roll it out, and then we toast the finished product.
Breakfast cereals are the archetypal processed food. You start with a whole grain, but then you process it, you strip it of anything that slows down eating. You add reinforcing substances, you add sugar to it, you add other stimuli to it. You make it into a habit. You add the emotional gloss of advertising. You add toys to it. You make it part of the routine. You make it something that is socially acceptable.
A kilo of corn costs around 15 pence. On the high street, a kilo of Kellogg's cornflakes comes to £3. A 2,000% difference. This process of buying low and selling high is known in the business as adding value. It's what the modern food industry does.
The way you make money is to process food as much as possible, add value to it, add convenience, add packaging, add health claims, whatever you can do, complicate it essentially. And you get people to pay for other things besides the very cheap commodities at the bottom of the food chain.
Some cereals only offered empty calories because of the way they were made.
A whole grain starts off typically with 20 to 26 nutrients, essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals, essential fats. Processing itself damages nutrients. They might be heat sensitive, like the B vitamins, or you might be breaking down the cereal so much that you start the process of the cell structures breaking down.
The big manufacturers did have a partial answer to these criticisms. For decades, they had been spraying vitamins back onto their cereals.
What the company does is to fortify the grain with a range of vitamins and minerals. These are over and above the levels that would be seen in the natural grain.
In this environment, food companies had to be nimble to exploit our growing obsession with diet. Having sat out the muesli revolution, the next big fad gave industry Goliath Kellogg's the perfect opportunity to catch up. The roughage missing from much processed food was becoming a worry for many. 1982, and out of nowhere, fibre was about to become the next big thing.
Based on eating fibre, like bran, it became the biggest selling diet book in British publishing.
2 million copies have been sold so far. It's the fastest selling Penguin book ever.
Bran and fibre really took off in a huge way over the space of a very few years, with the publication of the F-Plan diet, a hugely successful diet book which advocated eating an extremely high fibre diet.
So everybody suddenly went fibre mad. And bran is boring. I mean, bran is the outer crust of the wheat. So when you've taken all the nice white bits out and made it into flour, you get left with bran. And bran usually is used for cattle feed and things like that.
The issue for Kellogg and for the advertising was that as soon as you mentioned bran, the consumer reaction was, well, that really doesn't taste very nice. In fact, it probably is pretty disgusting.
To get the public to buy bran, even if it was packed with sugar and salt, required a tour de force from the ad men. They didn't disappoint. Kellogg's dumped a jingle-shaped bomb on the heads of an unsuspecting British public.
Well, what about the weather? Is it going to rain? You can ask without any reply.
The advert that I tend to remember the most is the bran flake advert.
They'll all reply.
You know, the tasty, very, very tasty. They're very tasty. Just because it's sort of light and slightly humorous,
I just remember everyone saying, look, just remember, you've got to get across this taste message. You've got to make it very, very clear that these actually taste really good, surprisingly good.
The cereal story is one of constant reinvention and restless searching for new ways to add value to grain. The latest manifestation left the cereal bowl altogether, spawning a brand new multi-million-pound sector. It was the most radical step of all in the evolution of cereals. It was the cereal bar.
Mr. Breakfast, choose carefully. All is not lost with Nutri-Grain bars, new from Kellogg's, the breakfast people.
We want foods that need as little work as possible. All you have to do is pour them in a bowl and pour milk over it. The interesting thing is, at a certain point, even that begins to seem like a lot of work. So then you move to the next step, which is cereal bars. Cereal bars are for people that don't even have time to pour milk over cereal in a bowl, but want to eat on the run. So you see there's this constant arms race of how can we make this food more processed and more convenient.
From the cornflake to the bar, cereal has become the blank slate for our aspirations and neuroses, and in the process has made billions.